Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Oddities video. I thought I would mix another one of these in here since it's been a while since I touched this particular topic. The reason why I wanted to do a video here is because I came across a subject that was there on Reddit that I thought was pretty interesting. It's called the third man syndrome, or another way of calling it is the third man factor. And when I was looking at the information with it, I realized that it actually was very close to a video that I talked about almost 10 years ago that was called the Butterfly People. In that video, I was talking about some beings that were saving some children during an F5 tornado. It got some good views. There was a lot of interesting stuff to feature there. So I'll include a link for it below if you haven't had a chance to see it. But when I was again reading this information about the third man syndrome, I realized there was a lot of similarities associated with it. So again, I thought I would feature it here. I'm going to give as much information as possible and then also give some examples and then finally my own thoughts and opinions on it too. But otherwise, the big thing that stands out is even though there's a lot of mystery associated with it, it still is a good thing. You'll see some reasons why coming across this particular subject in real life could actually be very, very good for you. So let's go ahead and let's talk about everything associated with this third man syndrome. And as always, I'd love to hear what your own thoughts and comments are on there too. So what is this third man syndrome? Well, for lack of a better term, it's essentially an unseen presence, although sometimes people do actually see certain things, that apparently provides comfort or support during some very traumatic experiences. Again, very similar to the Butterfly People video that I talked about those years back. Both of them involved very traumatic experiences, something that was happening that was very bad for people, and then some kind of presence that essentially made itself known and then was able to save those people. But that essentially is this third man syndrome. It's the idea that even though if you're alone and you happen to be in a very tight spot, like let's say it's a dangerous location, you're almost about to die because of essentially where you're in, and then all of a sudden you don't feel like you're alone. Something else is there with you. Not only that, but they're also providing support, sometimes comfort, and then in other cases, actually helping you come out of that experience alive. And when that happens, then that person is able to essentially chronically it afterward. So that's essentially what it is. Now, as far as some examples as to how this occurred, one of the most well-known ones was apparently from a gentleman by the name of Sir Ernest Shackleton. By the way, a theme that you'll find as well with this third man syndrome is that it tends to happen to people that do extreme activities, like those that are mountain climbers, or those that go on far off expeditions, or those that do some kind of high dangerous stunts, stuff like that. That's the ones where they in turn fall under the category of having more of these experiences because of the nature of their activities. Such was the case here with Sir Ernest Shackleton. He wrote about it in his book that was called South. It was written back on 1919, and it was there that he was doing an expedition in Antarctica. It was an Antarctica, I'm sorry. It was the 1914-1917 Antarctic expedition. It was there during that time period where him and his men, I believe he had three other people that were there with him, became stranded in a large pack of ice, and they were there for more than 2 years, basically by themselves. Oh, my apologies. It was him and two other companions, a guy by the name of Tom Crean and Frank Worsley. So altogether, there were three of them, but in actuality, all of them stated that there was a fourth traveler with them. So they were there just pretty much day by day at that location. They were going by mountain ranges and glaciers. They were trying to trek as much as they could, basically across the island of South Georgia. And then that's when they realized that they suddenly had a fourth traveler with them. In fact, they described it as almost being like a presence that they could all feel, but it wasn't a bad one. It wasn't dangerous at all. It wasn't a sense of doom, nothing like that. If anything, they stated that it provided them with hope and direction. In fact, a quote from Ernest Shackleton himself states that, "I know that during the long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were four, not three." This is what he ended up stating within his book himself. And then one of the other companions, again, a guy by the name of Frank Worsley, stated the following. He said, "There was indeed one thing about our crossing of South Georgia, I think, what I have never been able to explain. Whenever I reviewed the incidents of that march, I had the subconscious feeling that there were four of us instead of three." So interesting stuff, right? If it was only just one of them that was feeling the presence of a fourth party, that's something. But the fact that all three of them essentially had that same sensation, and I got the impression that this presence was always a little away. Like, in other words, it wasn't in front of them where they could directly see it. It must have been just a little bit outside of their view, just enough so that they knew it was still there, but just enough that they didn't see it. That's the impression that I got. But there it was, essentially guiding them and then moving them throughout that area, and then they were able to survive. They were able to get out of there, and they almost credit this sensation, whoever this presence was, with that particular item. And in fact, it's been chronicled in terms of other type of literary. In fact, the famous author T.S. Eliot described it in his poem called The Wasteland. He ended up talking about it again being a third who walks always beside you, referencing the third man syndrome. And then another real life encounter, again, seems to follow people involving higher risk activities. There was a climber by the name of Rahel Messnar, and then polar explorers Peter Hillary and Anne Bancroft that ended up stating the same thing. They were in some precarious situations, but then they suddenly realized that they were not alone. Now, if you want an encounter that's more recent and actually tied into obviously a very horrific tragedy, that was the September 11th attacks. It was there on the South Tower on the 84th floor where a guy by the name of Ron DeFrancesco stated that he was there when the second plane crashed into that building. Once that happened, he tried to find some ways out of that area to escape, at least find some kind of safe exit, but he couldn't. Obviously, with everything that was happening with regards to that crash, he just couldn't do that escape. And so right at the point when he was about to give up, that's when he heard what he described as an unfamiliar voice. This was a voice that was unseen, but it was male. Not only that, but it called him directly. It mentioned his name. It stated that he should not get up. I'm sorry, that he should not give up, that he has to get up, and then it tried to basically almost direct him over to another stairwell. In fact, it was commanding him at one point, telling him to get up. And then finally, it was telling him that, hey, you can do this. And then on top of that, it was almost like he stated there was a physical presence almost guiding him, unseen, but still guiding him to what would be the eventual exit. In fact, he stated that at one point, it was a sensation as if somebody had lifted him up, guided him over, led him over to another set of stairs, not to the point where they were actually grabbing his hand, but again, leading him to that location, and then he was able to escape. In fact, he was only one of the few, because of this unfortunate tragedy, he was only one of the few that ended up escaping. In fact, it was only him and four other people that ended up escaping from that area as well. And then one more example that I wanted to showcase here about another third man syndrome. This one involved a set of people that were there in the Canadian Rockies. They were, I don't know if they were just skiing there, or actually I think they were climbing around that area. But as it turns out, all of a sudden there was an avalanche, and then this avalanche was a very devastating one. It ended up carrying them over to another area about 2,000 feet away. These were by the names of James Savini and Richard Whitemer. Unfortunately, Whitemer ended up passing away from that avalanche, but Savini was there, but almost in and out. He was gaining consciousness and then getting out of it. What it turned out was this avalanche ended up breaking his back in two places. He also had a fractured arm. He had a set of severed nerves, torn ligaments in his knees, broken teeth, cracked ribs, and on top of that, he had internal bleeding. So he knew in a way of sorts that it was almost over for him. So he just basically laid down there to end up dying. But all of a sudden, he stated that there was a sensation from something invisible but very close to him. Again, an unseen presence. The way he described it was something I couldn't see, but it was a physical presence, and the presence communicated mentally, and its message was clear. You can't give up, you have to try. And so it kept urging him to get up, and then it started giving them practical advice of how to do this. In fact, it told him to follow the blood dripping from the tip of his nose as if it were an arrow pointing to a certain way. And so he did that. He ended up getting up, he ended up breaking through a lot of the deep snow, and then part of that time, he was also crawling as well because of what occurred to his back. But either way, though, this presence, whatever it was, he described it as almost being behind him, behind his right shoulder, telling him that he needed to continue in order to survive. And so little by little, he ended up making it back to his base camp, and then that's where a lot of people that were there ended up consoling him and obviously aiding him afterwards. But he again stated that this too, the third man syndrome. Somebody was there and they were directing him. He just could never see who that was. Now, as far as what is the third man syndrome in of itself, like what causes it, there's two camps associated with it. On the one side, there's the idea that it's spiritual. There's the idea naturally that it's considered religious, like in the form of angels. Like these are angels that are there seeing somebody in trouble, directing them, making sure that they're able to get out of a location, whatever their circumstance is, and then they in turn are ethereal. Like you can't see them, you can't really feel them per se, but they're there as a presence. And so a lot of people that believe that again it's tied to that factor. Then there's the other side associating it with more of a scientific level. It's the idea that the body itself, particularly the brain, is almost doing a form of a coping mechanism. These people are involved in some kind of extreme danger, some kind of extreme situation, and so because of it, it almost starts producing a hallucinatory effect. It's almost the idea like the body or the brain is trying to trick you into thinking a certain thing to get you out of that dangerous situation. If so, it's amazing how the body works, right? It's amazing how the mind works. The idea that it could do something along these lines under these extreme circumstances just to make sure that you could survive. Otherwise, there could be a lot of chance that on your own, as is, you would not be able to do the same. You would basically be in a situation where you would have no chance of surviving whatever that calamity is. But here, the way the body shifts into this other extreme mode, whatever that is, that's when all of a sudden it takes over, and this third man syndrome goes into effect. Interesting stuff. I have no idea which is the real one, which is not. I'm sure there'll be some comments, people stating that it could be religious, it could not, it could be something else involving brain activity, biochemical reactions. I don't know. Again, that's not for me to decide. I'm just putting that information out there for everyone. The last thing I wanted to feature, though, was this is a subject matter that has usually been involved in several forms of media. Like, for example, in the book World War Z, which is the one that was used for the famous movie by Brad Pitt. I've seen that movie. I don't recall this being within there, but I guess it's in the book itself only. If so, someone let me know in the comments. But apparently there's a Colonel Christina Eliopoulos who crash lands in some kind of zombie territory. And the only reason that they survive that crash is because there's someone codenamed Mets Fan who ended up guiding them to another location, I guess guiding them to safety. But then as it turns out, it's a figment of her imagination, even though they believe that it's a real person. And then if you've seen the movie Gravity, I have not seen that yet. It's probably in my to-do list, so I'll see it one of these days. But the main character ends up getting some consolation from another character, an astronaut, Matt Kowalski, who ended up floating away, I guess, into space earlier in the film. Well, they see them again, and the main character shows her how to return to Earth, and then it turns out it's a figment of her imagination as well too. So interesting stuff. So let me know what you guys and gals think. Third man syndrome. A unique subject when it comes to the world of mysteries and oddities. Is it a real thing? Is it religious? Is it something scientific that the mind makes up? Is it something else altogether, completely different? Let me know. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and comments are on there too. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.